Well, hello and welcome to the show, and I think keep this interesting right off the bat. Maybe this will help you. Don't know if you need this, but keep it with a story time right off the bat. Finally, in my little country home, my little bucolic happiness out here, we finally got glass put in. I think it was 5 years in the making before we got fiber optics out here, because you know they always start with the population dense areas because that's where the revenue is. More house, more drops, more people, more votes, whatever. And I'm not sure we didn't have a government grant come into this at some point in time, but finally they put it in. And when they put it in, I really was in the middle of trying to work on this computer, and I got caught with not having a Wi-Fi adapter in the PC. When I bought the PC, it had Ethernet, it had some of the stuff. I got most of it I could for about $2,500 after tax and shipping and all that good stuff 7 years ago. And I found out, because I didn't do my research, I didn't have multiple PCI slots in here, so there's no board. So I've been working off of Ethernet for a very long time. There's not even Bluetooth in this bad boy. So I came up with one of these just in one day, inside 24 hours. It's a little dongle type thing that goes in your USB forward. Let me go ahead and hit this right here. All right, now I got it off Amazon. It's only $22, and I guarantee you that this did not exist when I put in that Ethernet cable from one room all the way up through 2 floors into the next floor, down the wall, and finally hit my little spot, plus my jack boxes and all that kind of stuff, just to have 100 megabits per second Ethernet, which worked good until we pulled the router with all that stuff and set it up on the second floor, and then I was just broken. So in 24 hours I came up with this little guy. Let's take a look at this thing, because in fact it did work. Now, Amazon, I looked at it. Some people said it wasn't much punkin'. Other people said it was really good. It is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, Chinesey. The directions are not great, and even though they gave you 2 choices to install it, neither one of them worked, and I had to go in there manually. I just had to plug it in and then tell Windows where to find the particular type of driver for it, which if I go back to the main screen here real quick, it comes in one of these little USB cards, which you're never really sure if it's not through, a company that you know of. But anyway, put it in there, it works, and it works very well. I'm going through a ceiling, a wall, a floor ceiling assembly, a wall, and another wall to get to the router upstairs, and it has amazing little bandwidth so far. And it's only $22. If you find you've got an old computer, maybe it doesn't have 5 gigahertz on it, maybe it's just got 2.4, and there's a lot of traffic. Maybe you're in an apartment complex and there's more 2.4 than you have 5 gigahertz in there. You might find you get a lot more effectiveness with the 5 because of less population, plus it's just a higher standard. So that's your first part. Let's get the show started. All right, well, what I've got here, I think I've got everything up and running. I'm watching my frame rate on OBS Studio, which I have launched. That's what this is. I turned this on because obviously I can't have it running in the background and see what the quiet state is of the PC. And it says I have dropped a few frames. I apologize if the video quality on this segment isn't top notch. It's just what I have to work with. So what I have here is Open Hardware Monitor. It's an open source program or open type program where it's freeware. It's out there in the world, been out there in the wild for quite a while, and a lot of people use it. I won't attest to it or swear to it because I don't know about its origin. Didn't write it myself, but it has been helpful to me. Now at the top, well, I've got 3 columns set up. This is the current value in this leftmost column, minimum and maximum, which speak for themselves. Now the setup of this, here's a computer name, the motherboard. We come down through here. The first thing I have up here are the 2 fans, because this system only has 2 fans in it, CPU and case fan on that birthing person's board. We also have the Intel i7-7700 or 7-year-old computer chip. got the bus speed, which is set to be 100, and we have 4 cores. That's the only cores we have in this one. It has a max speed, turbo boost speed by Intel at 4.2 gigahertz, and it will go down to 800 megahertz. Yes, 800 megahertz before it clocks out or it stops the processing. So those are our ranges. Now the set clock, or the said to be clock, is 3.6 gigahertz. So we're certainly working in the upper headroom as it sits right now. Now these are our current temperatures. We see that a while ago I had 56 degrees. I was cooling down from a previous, I guess, startup, I guess it was, when I was checking the studio. And we have, of course, the core lows, the lows on each core. And right now all I'm doing is running this OBS studio, so we're just bouncing around the low 20s or so. Now the CPU package, that is what the i7, this particular i7 is maxed out at 65 watts average, and that can bounce a little above, it can bounce a little below, and it's not going to hurt it. Now down here at memory, this is our system memory load. We're using 17.6% of that at the moment. And of course, the data, this is by gigabyte. So 5.6 is being used. We got 26.4 left over. I'm not worried about the video card, because if you look at the power wattage on the video, yeah, we're doing nothing. Now that may be the onboard video chip that's built into it versus the NVIDIA 1050 or 1050 watt. I guess 1050, I guess it is. Anyway, so we've got this set up. What we want to do is we want to watch this like a heart rate monitor to see what we're doing, to see if our fans are indeed responding, to see what our power consumption, if it spikes. We want to make sure that we don't get too crazy with our core temperatures up here. And of course we can keep an eye on how much memory we're using. We got plenty of it. It's not a problem. Power, same way. We want to make sure it doesn't get over that 65. Anything looking crazy. In an ideal world, I don't mind the temperatures on the CPU getting up around 60, 70 degrees. At 80, it won't hurt it, but it'll begin to clock down or turbo down this number right over here on our frequency. We'll lose speed. So we know the junction temperature, the hottest the chip should get, is 100 degrees beyond. At 100 and beyond, you're running risk of damaging either the motherboard or the processor. So we want to make sure we stay nice and cool. Now in the BIOS, or the basic input-output system, you know, that startup thing that we never look at, I have this set. It was never changed from the factory from the Intel specs. Let Intel handle everything. Let it have thermal shutdown if it gets too hot. You know, maybe I get a little too dusty and it's not breathing good, or I have a problem with the chip somehow and we want to shut that thing down. We want to shut it down before we damage that processor. I think when I originally paid for this 7 years ago, I paid $600 for this i7. So it's certainly not worth that now, and it's 7 years old, but I still don't want to burn up my chip because it goes with the motherboard and everything I have set up. So Asus and AMD, apparently, you can look on the internet if you want to, they had a real problem where either or both were involved, but they were running really high clock. They were overclocking the processors, and it got hot where it burnt some boards up and burnt some processors up, and no one apparently was willing to jump right out there first in line and say, yes, we'll take responsibility. So they ended up with some boards that died, and I expect most of them got out of warranty before they died. They probably didn't last 7 years because of their being overclocked. You can always set them down, to my understanding, to the Intel defaults and extend the life of your computer, because I'm not really ready to spend several $1,000s for a new computer. So this is when I'm running this little program. Now, in just a second, I'm going to come over here. This is the program we're using. We'll look at this one as well. We can click on that, and it gives us a little different, just gives us core temps. Won't give us the fan and how they work over here. But with this one, core temp, you can minimize it, and it will show up down here in the tray, so you can look at it and watch your board as kind of as a dashboard type situation. Keep an eye on your temperature. Now I have this right here, Cinebench. This is a program we're going to use to throw the processor in its maximum state 100% capacity to see what our maximum temperatures are going to be. It's also available out there. Cinebench 24 is what this is. And it may drop some frames when I have it maxing out the processor. We just don't know quite yet. CPU-Z, what I've got here, if we look at this, it will actually give us some memory stats. We'll look at that when we get done testing it. And I'm not going to let the full process run. We just want to see the temperatures come up. We want to see them ramp up quickly for quick response. And then when we shut off the test, we'll see it come down. In fact, you'll actually see when I start the program and then when I start the test, there'll be 2 spikes. And then when I turn it off, I turn off the test and then turn off the program. You'll see them, both of those, as spikes here on the CPU. So let's get started. We're loading the program. It's loading its little modules and all of its little goodies, and we should see our spikes start to show up here pretty soon. And then I will kick off the test, and you'll definitely know when the test kicks. All right, here comes the test. Now, why I'm using this is you can easily see, we can see our fans are reacting to the increased load. We're at 100% now. If we go over here and look, we're at 100%, and it will fluctuate to 98, 97, something like that. But we're running all 4 cores in the package at maximum. We'll look at our watts, see we're running 58, 59. We will eventually heat up to about 60, and it'll kind of regulate. We have a maximum of 4.2. You see we're running at 4 gigahertz. That's 600 megahertz above, or 400 megahertz above the stated clock, but we're not throttling down by any means. We can see what our current RPM is on each of those fans. And when we come down here at our memory, we're pulling 12.5 with both of these programs running, 19.5 available. Here's where we were before we kicked on the studio. It took up a little memory, and now we're running the memory that the benchmarking program uses. You see the power then stepped up, ramped up. It's pretty self-explanatory. But look at the processor. It's flatline, 100%. But if we look at our slope up here, it looks like we're going to hold fairly steady. Now, it may go up and down a little bit, but it looks like we're going to stay in the 60s for a while. So that gives me a good idea that this birthing person's board, as I have the case vented and it working together, that we're in pretty good operating specs and we're not losing too much performance when we bog it down. Now, if I was compiling another video and I may be working on it for 2 hours, if it weren't breathing well, we might start to see the clock speeds drop because we have the thermal protection and we have the throttling involved with the Intel chip, because I'm not going to risk burning a processor up just to overclock a little bit. I did overclock some of the memory. Now, I think I'll let that run. We'll pull up CPU-Z. Now, CPU-Z is also out there on the internet for you to use. It identifies the processor, the maximum wattage that it's going to use, the standard CPU clock speed, how we've got the memory configured. Our bus speed is holding steady at 100 megahertz. We come over here to the they call it main board. We know it's ASRock, American Megatrends BIOS. It gives us some basic ideas of how our system is running. Very good information. Here we kick to the memory, and we see that we're running 32 gigs. It's running, the DRAM frequency is running at basically 1 gigahertz, and we're seeing that we have it running at an overclock speed of 3800, because this happens to be, it should get up 39 back and forth here a little bit. Maybe it's getting a little warmish. Let the clocks run. Now, here's an interesting thing. I did overclock the memory because I'm not worried about burning it up. I replaced the memory recently with some stuff online for about $57, 32 gigabytes for, that's $57 plus tax and free shipping. And it stated in the XMP that it would be 18 on the clocks on the latency, would have 22 on the CAS and RAS at 22 both, and then 42 on the cycle time. Okay, that would be the refresh time. And of course, we're looking at what we're actually running it at. According to the motherboard, I put it in that mode, according to XMP, and it was stable. So I bumped it up to running in what they called sport mode, and then I ran it Sport Plus. The worst that's going to happen is it crashes the program. It could potentially damage the operating system if it's writing a critical file when it crashes. But anyway, this is a safer thing in my mind to do than running the clock on the processor so much higher. And we're still doing good with 3 different programs running and whatever's in the background. We're still holding at 4 gigahertz, and we're just about 70 degrees, 69, 70 degrees. We got 10 more degrees Celsius or centigrade before it's going to start to kind of slow that clock down. And we have the SPD, we have the graphics, we have the bench test. I don't know what, I've never used that. Single thread, multi-thread, we could probably bench test that if we want to. I've just never done that. And of course, about there you can find it CPU ID freeware based on CPU ID development validation by here. So you can see what we got. You can find this out on the internet if you want to test some things. Now, I've talked enough. We're going to shut down the test. We can see that we're going up here a little bit. We see the processor maybe coming down a little bit in temperature, so let's go ahead and stop it. What I want to see is a quick ramp down and kind of return to normal. Here I've stopped the test, and when it gets good and stopped, now I will go ahead and cancel the program. We should see probably 2 peaks. And there we go, and now we'll start getting our processor threads over here, our temperatures, to look like they did before. We've released the memory. We're release the wattage that we're using. We're no longer needing it. We can come over here to our maximum, and we'll see during that test we didn't exceed 63 watts on the CPU package. No core. The cores didn't get above 54. The DRAM barely measured at 3.4 watts, so it's not pulling a whole lot. And we're back down on our CPU usage per core. So we used all 4 cores, all we could squeeze out of this 7-year-old machine, and we're already seeing the clock start up back to its 41, 42 type of cycling. So we're running this board fairly efficiently, and if you care, we'll talk about some other stuff here in a little bit, or we can go ahead and kick out the video at this time. Hey, appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, if you will, subscribe to the channel, either the YouTube or the Rumble channel, which this appears in. And if you can, check the notification bell or settings to make sure that you get notified when new videos are posted. Appreciate it. Well, I think you can agree with me. Those are some terrible benchmark numbers, but remember, this thing is 7 years old. Now, another step that I might do if I don't want to completely build the custom loop i7 kind of decked out system with Gen 5 M.2s and other stuff in it to really speed up the data, is I could potentially buy like a motherboard of several years older and chipset that takes the DDR4 memory and maybe some M.2 4th gen stuff, and I might be able to build it up from there. At the same point, still use the old SSDs. Now, these old solid state drives are not going to be super fast, but I will add this part into the tail. When I took the machine apart to dedust it, to clean it up, to make sure that it was running good, because I thought, well, this thing's running a little bit dirty. Let me check, see what the CPU temp is, and it came up 62 at idle. That's too much. So I cleaned it out, and I found this little guy. It's an old hard drive in the computer, and I've known it's been there, but I haven't really worried about it too much. Over the last couple of years, I've heard the titty of the unit as if it's got an I/O error in it. And in fact, this drive does. So I'm thinking, well, you know, I had C drive, I had D drive, you know, not a real big problem. Well, this is my lesson learned from that. When I look at the date on the dead drive, I see that it's very old, very old. In fact, the drive I was running without error incidents is a 2016. So that was my little wake-up call. I had a dead drive in there. I suspect that it's just left over from the last computer that died. I pulled the hard drive out of it so that I could boot either Windows 7 or whatever it was, 98, and then go to the window. I guess that's what it was, Windows 98, and then run 7 on top of that with the new computer, which would have been this one that has gone to 8, which was a dog, and then they replaced it with 10, and they won't let me have 11. So I think this was just the old drive, but I left the power plugged in, and so it just spun and spun till it, it just died of old age. That got me thinking I need to do something with the spinny disk in there, and I decided that I would buy a new SSD card because it's only $100 for 2 terabytes. That's pretty cheap. Actually, less than $100 for 2 terabytes, and that could replace that D drive that hasn't failed, but I can leave it in the machine, just not powered up until I want an image as a backup. And then it took them so long to get me this drive sent my way, I got mad at them a little bit. I admit I have a little temper sometimes, and so I canceled the order. And just to show them who's boss, I replaced the order instantly within seconds and added one of these. It's a 240 gig drive to replace my 120 gig drive in there that was having trouble. It's just with over the years and your program data and all the stuff you have on a machine. Even if you put a program on D drive, it still has to write program data to your file, and that kind of blows out your system drive, your operating system drive. And it too was old. So at $17, actually $18 because it was $17.99, that kind of stuff. I replaced both of these drives for about $117. They're fresh and new, and we're going to see right now something. We're going to take a look at this and see what's going on, see if we made any improvement. Now, hidden underneath this panel is a previous test of the spinny drive that still works, not the dead one, but the older one, or newest of the older ones. And this is a program called Crystal Disk Mark. Let me zoom in for you so we can see it a little bit better. Now, this is another bit of freeware that you can get a hold of out there if you want to just kind of test your system. Now, I'm on SATA or SATA or SATA, depending on what part of the world you're from, how they pronounce it. But it's an old hard drive format. It's a serial hard drive format. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to have this set for just one test count because I don't want it to take all day for us. And it's going to do a random type of test. And we don't need to put it in gigabytes per second because this is going to be way slower than that. But let's just see what the new solid-state hard disk drives will do in this as we have it built up. Now it's going to run. Now if you do a random test, it's going to hit all over memory, which makes a big difference for a mechanical spinning platter drive because it has seek times to get from the inner sectors to the inner rows to the outer rows as it tries to find the sectors on the drive. Now this solid state type drive, which looks about like a thick credit card, doesn't have to do that because it's just random memory. So I really don't need to test it a lot of times. It should be fairly uniform test to test because there's no spinning parts in it. There's no mechanical requirement for the read head to spin over, the disk or in between the various disks that it may have in here. So we're going to run this. You can download this. You can find this. It's called, again, one more time, it's called Crystal Disk Mark. And you can pull this. This is a little bit of an older version. It's a simple version, a classic version that most people use. And what it's going to do is it's going to go out here and do some read tests, some write tests, and it's going to give us an average idea of what it's going to take. Now, this SATA standard that's in here, SATA 6, is going to max out at 600 megabytes anyway, no matter what drive I have. So I know I'm not going to be faster than that. And if you compare that to an M.2 solid state drive, for each drive generation that you go up, the speed doubles. So there's some great improvements that we can do given time if we build our next system. So the question is, did we do any good to bring it up from the depths of despair into its current state, because then it'll be good to at least get me through the next year while I can figure out, is the i9 problem that have recently been broken out there. Intel has a problem with i9s dumping, crashing. They're not really sure what it is, but the data is certainly there. And we also have, I was planning on going i7, but certainly an i5 with 16 cores, four times the cores I have in this older machine running at about the same speed. It's bound to be improved architecturally and would help us out a lot. But we'd have to buy a board, and then we'd have to either compromise with an little older design just so I could use the memory out of this board, you know, into the other. I may be able to fit it in the case and it not breathe too hot, may not be a dragon and breathe too hot. But let's go back and look at that, at this board. Now this is what the solid state drives that we've replaced. Both of these run about the same speed, about 500. It's not quite 6, but if I drop the program off, we'll see what the spinny disk was rated at. And I just tested it, it got it 187. So from this, yes, I got some improvement. The old system drive, although it was small, it wasn't solid state, it worked well, it just didn't have much room for the system to run. So upgrading it for $18 was not a bad idea. And then replacing the 2 terabyte that was 7 years old, this mechanical spinning disk, was probably not a bad idea to do either. So that's not necessarily money thrown away, because I'll still get some use out of it. And I can stream with this machine. It streams very well. I'm happy with it. It's just a little slow on the production of the videos using the software. That is, I looked it up last night before I ordered a newer version. It dated back to 2013, and that wasn't even my first version of that software. So I know I've got a couple of compressions in the video that I can't make use of because they hadn't been invented at the time the software was. So I've found a little older version, new in box, and I'll put it on. It doesn't have all the AI stuff, so it won't be as great as the 24 version, but it'll be a step up for a very cheap dollar, and maybe I can just use this for a little bit longer than I had intended on. So anyway, I hope this bit of ramblings, although it may not make great sense to you to upgrade a machine of this year's, it has been a good machine. Some of the new chips, even though they may be the 13th and 14th generation, they're having a little problem. The more powerful the machines are, the bigger the power supply, the more heat they put in the room, the more stuff you gotta have, and they get expensive pretty darn fast if you don't compromise. If you compromise, you get something in between, and maybe that would be good enough, and we may go that route. I just haven't done enough research on it. So I hope this has been at least worth listening to me ramble. Maybe you're not familiar with these freeware programs, but you can at least check the health of your machine in a lot of ways by seeing how it's running hot and whether or not your core is running very hot, or your dates on your drives are getting old on you. So at least I'm safe from data loss for a while. We appreciate you. I guess that's all we need to talk about on what all I did to kind of speed this up. It's still a dog, but it's less of a dog than it was before. So if it was a Chihuahua, it may be a Catahoula, or if it was maybe a German Shepherd, now maybe it's a Greyhound, but it's still a dog is a dog is a dog. See ya.